At the first frames, we see two men. They get into the car and drive somewhere. It was the 8th of June 1996. The men spotted a girl on a bike by the roadside. She turned off the main road towards a wheat field, unaware that the car was following her. When the girl noticed this, one of the men got out of the car and chased after her. The second man, named Timo, was clearly aware of the impropriety of what was happening but did not try to stop the first man. He picked up the girl's headphones from the ground. Pierre took the girl's life and asked Timo to help cover up the traces of the crime. They left the bike in the wheat field. Pierre told his accomplice to discard the headphones here too. Timo obeyed, and they left. Later, after thoroughly cleaning the car, Timo boarded a tram, intending to leave forever. Pierre ran after him but was ultimately forced to stop. 23 years passed. Elena Lang takes a run in the forest. There is a wooden cross in the field nearby, where Elena regularly brings flowers. It was exactly at this spot 23 years ago that Pia disappeared. Today is Friday. Seneca skips school, for which the parents scold her. In response, the girl rebels, and against the prohibition, leaves home. She received a call from her friend Maria. Detective David Jan received an invitation to a party. All colleagues were very happy about his return. It's also no secret to anyone that some time ago, David lost his wife. Elena Lang also came to the same party. Meanwhile, Seneca left a voicemail message for her parents, saying that she would spend the night at Maria's and return home tomorrow. David Jan is not in a celebratory mood, unlike the others. He stepped into the restroom, trying to deal with his emotions. But his solitude was quickly interrupted by two colleagues. At some point, a conflict arose between drunken men. David had to intervene. It's hard for Elena to listen to others talk about their children. Elena shared that she also had a daughter, but many years ago, someone attacked her in the wheat field. Late in the evening, Carl Wegam tries to reach the daughter. However, Ruth does not share her husband's concern, believing it's normal for teenagers. Seneca is still waiting for Maria and other friends at the amusement park, but no one shows up. At some point, Seneca noticed a suspicious car. Christian Mittich showed David the case of Pia, who was found in the lake. The criminal was never caught. On that day, some boy saw a red car nearby. That was the only lead. This cost the lead detective his marriage. His wife was Elena Lang, Pia's mother. Tomorrow will be the 23rd anniversary of Pia's demise. Meanwhile, that same car is following Seneca. Suddenly a man got out, saying hello. Seneca's parents are already asleep, unaware that someone near the cross in the wheat field has discarded their daughter's belongings. Timo Friedrich, father of two, returned home late. This woke up his wife Julia, who had grown accustomed to her husband constantly being delayed. Saturday morning arrived. David Jan was awakened by a call. Elena Lang, who was out for her usual run, saw police cars near the cross. It turns out in the morning, a farmer found a bicycle and a sports bag here. Matthias Grimmer finds it a strange coincidence that Pia's belongings were found in the same place 23 years ago. Seneca still hasn't returned. Ruth is worried, but Carl is confident that their daughter is still sleeping in her room. Timo Friedrich is a model family man. But there's no escaping the past. Today the news reported about Pia and the discovery of a bicycle and a red sports bag in the wheat field early in the morning. These two incidents are oddly similar. Carl and Ruth Wegam were horrified, while Timo barely contained his emotions. He had hoped to forget about the past forever, but here it was, catching up with him. Divers combed the same lake where Pia was found many years ago. The detectives suspect both cases are linked. It was determined that the items in the field belonged to Seneca Wegam. Police cordoned off the crime scene and spoke with the girl's parents. Matthias Grimmer reassured the couple, saying it was probably just a joke and Seneca may have eloped with her boyfriend. But the parents stated she didn't have any boyfriend. They are sure something bad has happened. At night, Timo couldn't sleep. Julia asked what was wrong. Timo only said that he felt a little nauseous after the party tonight. While his wife went for a glass of water, Timo reminisced about meeting Pierre Summer for the first time when they were both students. Sunday arrived. Police combed the wheat field in an attempt to find Seneca. Reporters surrounded Elena's house. Watching his wife and children swimming in the pool, Timo couldn't stop thinking about the past. He has taken time off work on the pretext that he is not feeling well. But that's not what Timo told Julia. He was supposedly called to work urgently and wouldn't be back until tomorrow. Christian Mittich visited Elena's house to talk about her daughter. Meanwhile, David Jan, studying records from the archives, felt restless again. Matthias Grimmer noticed this. David helplessly expressed he couldn't control it. Elena, like Christian, was convinced Seneca wouldn't return. Everything was unfolding exactly as before. Ruth and Carl were in despair. They still held hope their daughter would return unharmed. However, with each passing moment, that hope diminished. David also arrived at Elena's house and found Christian Mitic here. He left them, chasing the reporters away. David was there to talk to Elena about Pia. Elena only hopes this time the police will catch the criminal. She has always wanted to look into his eyes. David shares Elena's feelings. 5 months ago, he lost his wife but hasn't cried since then. Meanwhile, Carl tries to call Seneca, unaware that at that moment someone threw her phone into the woods. Carl is in despair. Timo parked the car near a motel. Elena called Ruth but couldn't bring herself to say anything. Christian too is troubled by the unsolved case of Pia. In an emotional outburst, Elena scattered all the daughter's belongings, even though she hadn't changed a thing in her room in 23 years. David Jan has a nightmare about how he follows Seneca, but she keeps drifting away from him. He then tried to catch the elusive criminal in the woods, which leads him to the same lake. David woke to a knock on the door. Christian Mitic arrived with evidence that the same person committed both crimes. Even though the body hasn't been found yet, there's no doubt in anyone's mind that the same thing happened to Seneca as it did to Pia. Christian needs David's help. This time he's willing to do anything to catch the criminal. Timo recalls when Pierre asked him if he had any strange tendencies. Timo doesn't understand what his friend is getting at, so Pierre suggested watching some movies together. Timo liked what he saw, and Pierre couldn't help but notice. Monday came. The search for Seneca continues, but the Wegam spouses have lost hope. Timo is in a motel room, ignoring calls. Elena wants to leave the past behind, but Christian, her ex-husband, insists on another meeting. Timo has lost peace. Meanwhile, the detectives discuss their next steps. Their only lead is a red car. All owners of similar cars in the past were questioned, but it didn't yield results. With determination, Timo visited Pierre Summer for the first time in many years. They hadn't communicated all this time. Timo directly asked why he did it again. But Pierre swore he had no involvement. Pierre also told Timo that he often remembered him. However, after that incident, Timo simply disappeared. His number was not even in the phone book. When Pierre began to question Timo about his family, he was about to leave, but Pierre stopped him and gave him a disc with his favorite video. Pierre invited him again tomorrow to reminisce about the old times. David examined all the details of the case. Elena Lang and Christian Mitic, who was leading the investigation, appeared on television, recounting the events from 23 years ago. Of course, Matthias Grimmer disliked Christian publicly stating that these two crimes were linked, especially when Seneca hadn't been found yet. Elena had no more strength to continue the broadcast. Julia turned off the TV and tried to reach her husband, but he was occupied with something else. Timo played the disc with that same video. He clearly enjoyed it. Angry, Carl Wegam came to the police station demanding explanations. Earlier, the detectives assured that Seneca might have simply run away, but something else was said on TV. The detectives subdued the violent man. He cried in helplessness. Timo remembered when he and Pierre arrived at the lake, hiding their dreadful secret. Tuesday arrived. Carl was getting ready for work. Ruth, who lay in the same position all night, didn't react. Timo never came home. Pierre noticed him at the playground, inviting him over for a snack and a movie. Timo followed. However, at the last moment, he changed his mind and ran away. Matthias Grimmer wants to make another attempt to find the criminal through vehicles. He assigned duties to all police officers and expected results by tonight. To tired-looking David, Matthias advised to go home. But David couldn't sleep peacefully while no one knew what happened to Seneca. He joined his pregnant colleague, Jana Glazer. Seeing the detectives in the parking lot near the police station, Timo felt panic. David noticed him but didn't pay much attention. Carl couldn't concentrate on work, constantly thinking about his daughter. The uncertainty tormented him, as it did Ruth, who listened to the daughter's last voicemail over and over again. Timo arrived at the cross in the wheat field. A couple passed by and asked if he was from the police. Timo just nodded. After that, Timo came to Elena Lang, saying his family was supposedly moving to the neighborhood. Elena invited him inside. Timo noticed Pia's photo and began to ask questions, pretending not to know the girl. Of course, Elena sensed that this guest wasn't who he claimed to be. Before leaving, Timo left his card for Elena. As he got into the car, he was pounding. Elena watched him from the window. David and Jana were checking all red car owners on the list. Ruth packed her things. She couldn't stay in this house any longer, and after saying goodbye to her husband, she left. Carl was now all alone. Old feelings flared up between Christian and Elena. Elena gave him the card, saying that the criminal had been here. Christian immediately called David, who said he'd come right away. While Timo was away, his daughter fell off the trampoline and got bruised. Meanwhile, Timo arrived at the lake. It was Pierre Summer's turn. Detective Glazer appeared on his doorstep, wanting to ask a few questions. Timo received a call from his wife. She said their daughter fell off the trampoline. But Timo couldn't go home due to the feeling of guilt. The detectives had already arrived at the Friedrichs' house. Jana Glazer conversed with Pierre, who seemed very friendly. Jana said she was here because the police were questioning all owners of red cars. Pierre didn't hide that he had a red Audi in the 80s. When the detective asked Pierre where he was last Friday, he got nervous. David and Christian explained to Julia that they had questions for her husband. Julia, not understanding what was going on, said he was an architect and was currently at a construction site. Pierre understands that he risks being exposed. Nevertheless, he tries to remain calm, and taking his diary, describes in detail everything he did last Friday. David asked Julia many questions about her husband. It turns out that after their wedding, he took her last name because he didn't want to bear his own. Finding nothing suspicious, Jana was about to leave. Meanwhile, Christian found inappropriate content on Timo's computer. After that, Christian stopped speaking kindly and demanded from Julia where her husband was. All this time, Timo was at the lake. Finally, he moved from the spot. Local teenagers noticed his car driving off the bridge. Timo did it intentionally because he couldn't live with the guilt. Thanking Pierre for everything, Jana left. This man seemed suspicious to her. Suddenly she received an urgent call, after which suspicions about Pierre Summer were lifted. Timo's car was retrieved from the lake's bottom. The detectives are sure that Timo Friedrich is the one responsible for both crimes. Carl saw this on the news. Seneca is still not found. Elena had conflicting feelings while watching the news. Ruth returned to her husband. Their common sorrow unites them. Wednesday came. A certain man decided to swim in the lake and found Seneca lifeless. The detectives are examining Timo Friedrich's computer and other evidence. David remembered seeing Timo in the parking lot the day before. Perhaps he wanted to surrender to the police. The detectives were informed that the body had been found. Seeing detectives approaching their home, the Wegam spouses immediately understood everything without words. There is no hope now. Christian suggested Elena to move, but she doesn't want to leave a place that reminds her of the daughter. The Wegams were brought in for identification. Meanwhile, David noticed some inconsistencies. On the day Pia disappeared, witnesses saw someone throwing headphones out of the car window from the passenger side. The car was parked facing north, meaning there were two perpetrators. However, Matthias Grimmer considered this theory absurd and that the case was closed. David continued to insist on his correctness. Perhaps the second criminal, losing contact with Timo Friedrich, despaired and reenacted the crime from 23 years ago. Timo Friedrich is the only one who could understand the message. However, Matthias Grimmer was not convinced by this. The detectives argued in front of everyone. Matthias only wants to close the case, while David wants justice. Ultimately, Matthias dismissed David from the case. Jana hugged him to support him. David didn't change his opinion, convinced that there were two criminals. Elena returned to the wheat field to the cross. David also arrived, announcing they found Seneca. When Elena asked if Timo Friedrich was the one they were looking for, David said yes. The Wegam spouse's life will never be the same. Christian Mittich burned the box with all the case materials he dedicated years to. Pierre Summer's secret remained a secret. He saw a newspaper stating that the main suspect voluntarily left life. Learning of his friend's demise, Pierre fell into melancholy. For years, Pierre sought him, and in despair, sent a message. And Timo received it. What happened was a much worse punishment for Pierre than prison. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel not to miss more exciting new products. Also, the authors will be pleased if you leave your opinion in the comments.